Welcome to the 13th grade. My name is Elliot Schoner. Let's talk about your fire number and let's make you rich. All right, guys. So welcome back. The last time that we spoke, or in the last video or lesson, if you will, we talked about giving you the task of creating your fire number. And just so you know, the fire number, it's been a little bit since you've actually between lessons is the number that you need to be able to retire. So FIRE standing for financially independent with the ability to retire early. So we want to get to a state of financially independent. Whether we decide to retire or not, it doesn't really matter. What that number is essentially the number that you need coming in each month that will cover all of your bills. And so we talked about creating that fire number with consideration of, what your housing expenses would be, what your transportation expenses would be, shopping, clothing, play money, if you will, going out to eat, all those types of things. If you are currently right now established, and when I say established, I'm saying maybe you're, I don't know, doesn't matter age, but 30, 35, maybe you're married, maybe you have kids or something, you got a mortgage, you got car payments and things like that. This should be an easier exercise for you because you can basically just do a budget. If you don't have a budget, you should have already done one. So hopefully, if you're doing your fire number, you should have a budget. And so, the idea is that if just to use what you currently have. If you were a younger person, then you may have seeked out help from mentor or your family or something like that to try to figure out what you think you might need as far as the cost of some things. And I remember I mentioned to you, you can go on Zillow, you can go on BMW.com or whatever, and you can kind of figure out what some of these things cost. Regardless, the idea of that fire number, and I didn't really mention this in the last video, is to see what you think you would need. This is just based on your own perception. And I didn't go into everything because I wanted you to see, I wanted to see, but I'm not there with you, right? So I wanted you to see basically is what you came up with and what you're thinking about financial independence or what retirement would look like. And this is kind of the point of this video, but like we're going to get into, did you choose a lifestyle that was like better than your current lifestyle? Did you choose a lifestyle that was less than your current lifestyle? Did you choose a lifestyle that was about the same? What did you include in your fire number? Did you include everything? Did you include some of the big major things, or were you considering maybe you wouldn't have those payments? So for most of us, our fire number is going to, like I said, should have included some idea of, let's just take the average person. If you took your average budget right now, your housing payment, your car, medical, even if you're on some sort of government assistance, or whatever, even, you're not going to necessarily get medical from an employer, and there is Medicare, Medicaid, but you may not necessarily get those until you're a certain age. So you got to think of, some medical care, and again, going out to eat. For the purpose of this exercise, because I don't know what your number is, but I want to talk to you about, sort of how you get to that number. I'm going to use the number of needing about $60,000 a year. Okay. The reason why I'm using that number is because it is important for one, we just have kind of a baseline. The average salary, the average income right now in the United States, household income is about 58,000, so about 60,000. Assuming if you're making about $60,000 a year, that if you continue to make $60,000 a year, that you would probably be perfectly okay with that. For those of you that are frustrated with me using that number, talking about that number already, I get it. Some of you could be thinking, I can't live off 60,000. This all depends on your geographical location. If you're living in California, it's very different than if you're living in Indiana and so forth. If you're living in the United States, it's very different than if you're living in Thailand. We'll get into all of those things as we sort of build, as we go through the course. But I wanted to use this 60,000 because we need a number to kind of plug into some calculators to see how we would get there. And so the idea here is you need about $60,000 a year, about $5,000 a month, and that $5,000 will be able to cover all of the expenses that you kind of need. Again, I understand some of you might be thinking, I'm living right now and 5,000 doesn't cover it. I get it. I get it. I get it. But the question is, how long will it take to get to $60,000 a year? So how much money do I need to save? And so if you remember, and I know this is very basic, but for those of you who have sort of no sort of financial literacy or education at all, we got to discuss it. The idea, remember, is that you can't retire unless you have that money coming in. There's really only two ways to have money coming in each month, and that's if you've already accumulated it. Now, there's different ways to have money. Like, obviously, you can go to work, right? And if you go to work, you get a paycheck. That's probably what most of us are doing right now. When you're in retirement, obviously, you're not working. So you can kind of have two different things. You can have Social Security, which if you've worked a regular 9 to 5, you're going to be paying into every single month. So you'll have some sort of, Social Security coming in. That's from the government. And then you might have a traditional like IRA or 401k or something like that that you've paid into over a certain period of time. And then once you kind of get enough money there, you can start to withdraw some of those funds. The way that you withdraw some of those funds, and again, without getting too much into the details, is there's this rule. It's called the 4% rule. And what the 4% means is that no matter what amount of money that you have in your account, a safe withdrawal is about 4% a year. And there's a reason behind, there's some historical stuff. Again, we won't get into all of that details because we could just, this video would be, 3 hours long or whatever, but just, it's a 4% rule. So for example, if I had, $100, 10% of that is, easy math is $10, so I would get $4 a month. So if I saved $100 and I was earning, 4% off that particular money, I'm getting about, $4 a year is what I'm making off of that. And so just with that idea, $4 is not, $60,000 a year. So I would obviously need a lot more than $100 saved. And so the idea is like, how long would it take me to get enough money using the 4% rule to withdraw? The 4% rule, again, allows me to withdraw funds without taking the principal. For example, if I had $1 million in an account and I withdrew $100,000 a year, well, after 10 years, I would have no money, right? Because I'm taking $100,000. The first year, I'm going to take 100,000, I have 90 left. And then I'm going to take out another 100, I'm going to have 80 left. Even if I got a decent return on that, if I'm taking out too much, the principal, the amount of money that's in it is earning that return, starts to shrink and go down. That's not a good thing. And so the 4% rule, what it does is it kind of keeps that baseline amount of money inside the account, whether it be a traditional IRA, 401k, or whatever. It allows you to withdraw money, a percentage of that particular money allows you to withdraw without actually touching what's called the principal. So that way you can, whether you live for 60 more years or 30 more years or 10 more years, that money's always there and available. So you don't get in a situation where, maybe you retired at 45 and then you all of a sudden, oops, I'm 70, I ran out of money, I need to go back to go back to work or something like that. There is another way that you can receive financing outside of an IRA 401k. We're going to get to that actually in the next lesson. But the other one is if maybe you don't have an IRA or 401k, but you have some sort of business. So imagine if you invested in a company or something like that. Maybe you don't have money sitting in an IRA, but that company you're earning sort of profit share. Technically, you could retire and get money off of that. We'll call it an asset, but you could get money off that asset. That money and the money that you receive is dependent upon what the return is of that particular asset, right? And actually, the money that you get from that is discounted. Again, we'll get into that. But the point is, for the traditional, just like most of 99%, the way that people will save. So if you're a younger person, you go into your mother, your father, and you say, hey, how should I secure my retirement? If you read any of the number of the books that are out there, literally dozens of them, they all kind of say the same thing. Work really hard, take a percentage of your income, 10%, 15, 30. There's different percentages out there that people use. Put it into a traditional IRA, put into a 401k, put into stocks, put into blended mutual fund. And then over time, that money will grow. And at a certain point, you'll have enough money in that particular nest egg that you'll say, okay, based on the 4% rule, okay, 4% of that money, I can start to withdraw those funds and I can live. So as a rule of thumb, to have about $60,000 a year, And I'll shrink the math up for you, but you need about $1 million. And if you were, sitting down with anybody, that's probably pretty much what they would tell you, give or take, a couple 100,000, again, all depending on your situation. Where we come up with that is if I have $1 million in an account and I'm taking 4% of that, so the $1 million is probably going to earn me maybe 6 to 8% a year. And so if I'm not, I don't want to take the 6 to 8% because it may not always earn that much. It might earn more. So I take the 4% rule. But if I take 4% of that $1 million, I'm getting about 40 grand or so in money from that, from my nest egg, from my traditional IRA, from the returns every single year. And so a lot of people do is they put a bunch of money in an account, they save that up over a long period of time. 65 years old, they retire, and they can start to withdraw that money from a traditional IRA 401k. I use that number of 65 because that's actually when the government says you can start to withdraw from some of those, give or take certain situations. And at the same time, something else kicks in called Social Security, or your ability to take out Social Security. And Social Security is something you also paid in. It's kind of a forced retirement plan that goes through your employer, and that every single time you get a paycheck, you're putting a little bit of money towards Social Security. And the idea is that even though you're not personally doing it, you're kind of being forced to do that, that over time, you'll sort of, accumulate these credits at the government, and the government's going to pay you when you're 65 a certain amount. And that amount changes, and it changes for inflation and all that kind of stuff. Again, we're not going to get into the weeds on that. So if I have $1 million in an account and I'm using the 4% rules, and so I'm taking out $40,000 a year out of my IRA, or my traditional IRA, out of my account, where's the extra 60,000 coming from that I need? Because that's the number we're using to hit the fire number. The other 20,000, I'm assuming is going to come from Social Security. Okay. If you weren't getting Social Security for whatever particular reason, that $1 million would have to be a lot. So we know right now, just as a baseline, and I'll just kind of recap here for you guys, because I know I'm covering a lot of things and talking fast. If we want to retire, and let's say we currently live off a budget of about $60,000 a year, and so we could say to ourselves, well, if I want to retire or be financially independent and be able to do whatever I want and kind of just don't have to go to work anymore, I want to retire, I'm going to have to replace the income that I'm getting from my job with something else. In order to do that, most cases, we save up money over time. That money grows. And when that money becomes large enough, we can start to withdraw that money over time through our retirement. The amount of money that we need to accumulate to replace the $60,000 income, using, again, that number is only as an example, is about $1 million in a traditional IRA 401k, just let's say in stock, right? We're going to receive about $40,000 of that's going to come directly from that traditional IRA, the thing we've been contributing to. And then we're going to assume we're going to get, somewhere around $20,000 or so, give or take, from Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Okay. Everyone's number is different. Again, we're using this as an example. So the question is then, or the whole goal here is to reach financial independence and to retire early, how long or how much money would we need to save each month? And if based on that much that we would save each month, how much or how long would it take for us to save that amount to reach 65? So, for example, if I started when I was 20 years old, and let's say I saved $100, and I did that all the way up until I was age 65, so I could have a nice sound retirement. If you go back to the stats, remember, a lot of people don't have any savings whatsoever, but you're following this. So let's say you decided I'm gonna contribute every single month. If I started at 20, how much money would I need to contribute every single month or week or year to ensure that when I was at 65, I had that $1 million, so I could get the $40,000 from it, including Social Security. I could make my 60,000 to match my fire number. So hopefully this is making sense to you. Okay. And so what if I'm not 20 though? What if I'm already 30 years old and I'm just watching this video? How old would you need to be, or how much money would you need to put in from 30 to 65, for example, every single month to reach that particular number? Okay. And then you can play around with this. If you go online, you can search, it's very simple, just put traditional IRA calculator, and you can play around with those numbers. I would encourage you to do so. Usually you can put in, if I contribute this particular amount of money and I get this particular return, how much will I get over 20 years or 35 years and so forth. Some of the calculators are better than others. Some have more things to put in there. If you're going to go play around, my guidance to you would be, of course, to start at the age that you are right now and then to put in a return, because you're going to have to enter this in, to put in a return of about 8% a year. The reason why is because historically, the stock market, just a traditional sort of S&P index fund, has given a return of about 8 to 10% every single year. Okay. And so you can kind of count on sort of that return if you just took the money and put it into stocks. So how long would it take? Let's go to the chart, and I just kind of want to show you a good example. Assuming that you're taking this course, you've gone to high school, maybe you graduated college, maybe you're starting to put things together, and you thought to yourself, I really got to figure out financial literacy, and maybe you're in your 30s, right? And you're just watching this. So I use that kind of as an example. And so basically, if I put in $500 a month, let's say my current age is, and actually this slide's slightly incorrect, so I'll change this here real quick. But the calculator basically says if I save $6,000 a year and I'm getting an 8% return, which is what we just talked about, and my current age is 30 and I want to retire at 65. And again, you can play around with these numbers. You can say, oh, I want to retire at 45, or I want to retire in 10 years. Like, what would I have to save? And obviously the numbers change. What exactly would happen? I put some interest rates and things like that in there. Don't worry about that for right now. I hit calculation, and as you can see, I will have, approximately, let's just call it $1 million. Now, this is going to be dependent upon, your tax bracket and a number of different things. Don't worry about that. But what I can tell you that is if you save from age 30 to 65, give or take, if you put $500 a month in and you're getting that sort of standard 8% return, so you're saving for about 35 years, $500 a month, at 8% return, you're gonna have that $1 million. Okay. And so this is the point, is for most of us, if we are making, so take it, if it's you and you're the person that's making, $60,000 a year right now. If I said to you, well, you need to take 10% of your income right now and just take that off and put that away at the age 30. And so now, instead of living off $6,000 a year, $60,000 a year, you're going to have to live off $54,000 a year. So you're going to take home less. You're going to have less spending money to pay for your current bills, so that you can put that money. And you need to do that for another 65, 35 years until you're 65. You would have the $1 million that you need to then start to withdraw the $40,000 based on the 4% rule, and then taking the Social Security that you're also paying into again through your employer. So hopefully that makes sense. So why are we discussing this? The reason why is just conceptually, I want you to think about this. If you did your fire number, and your fire number was, let's say, not $60,000 a year, maybe you said, which is $5,000 a month, maybe you said, you know what, I need about $7,000 right now to pay for all of my bills. So I'm going to need about that in retirement. Okay, that's fine. But this number, so instead of saving, let's say $500 a month, you'd actually have to save a lot more than that, right? You're probably going to save, maybe 750 a month, or 650. You can kind of do the calculations. What if you said, oh, well, really I need, more along the lines of like $10,000 a month because, honestly, like what I'm living today with inflation and everything, things are going to be a lot more expensive. And, $40,000 a year plus Social Security is just not going to cover it. 60 grand is not going to cover it. I'm probably going to need double that or triple that. And that's actually the correct way to think about it, because, what I paid for stuff when I was 20 is completely what I paid for stuff when I was 40. Like the pricing is different. Same house, same thing, just everything is more expensive. Surely 30 years from now, things are going to be even more expensive, correct? So if I could live my lifestyle right now based on 60, I'm probably going to need 80, maybe even 100 later, which means I can't be saving $500 now. I need to be saving almost double that, right? If I need double the amount of money coming out of my IRA based on the 4% rule, that means I need double the amount that I'm saving right now. So like a show of hands, right? If I could see all of y'all, how many people right now making 60, or do you think just conceptually, even if this isn't you, are making $60,000 a year and can actually put away $1,000 a month. So taking that, you're making 60, you're going to make $12,000 less. So now you're making $48,000 a year, right? 60 minus 12. So I don't want you to live off 60. I want you to live off 48. So whatever you're doing, whatever your budget is right now, whatever pain and all of that, I'm going to tell you, you need to take off $12,000 off of that, right? Pretty significant amount, almost 20% of your check. You need just to get rid of it and save. And the only thing that's going to do is ensure that you can live a lifestyle when you're 65 as you currently are right now. And so, if you're thinking to yourself like, well, that's stupid, that doesn't make sense. And this is actually where people get frustrated because they start to look at some of these things and they're like, well, that doesn't work. So how am I supposed to retire? Like, what is financial freedom? How does that work? How does the government think I'm supposed to help? How do you think I'm me? Like, how do I think you're supposed to retire? Because I understand, like, if I go to everyone right now and I say, listen, you need to take all the money that you're making right now, and you just need to take 20% of it and put it away for retirement, and you'll be safe. Like, most people are going to be like, yeah, but that's not going to work. And so the government knows that, and obviously that's impossible. So then what is retirement? What are people thinking? Well, here's the thing that we didn't discuss in the last video, because I wanted you to really think about what it meant for you, because I'm gonna ask you a few questions here, and based on your answer of these two questions is how you're going to completely change either one path or the other path. Okay. And so I'm going to show you why people aren't successful in hitting retirement. I'm going to show you why people aren't successful in getting to financial freedom. And it's because they're choosing paths that don't make sense. As I said in the book that I wrote, If I Was Your Dad, the math isn't mathing. It's actually our first chapter we talk about in that it just doesn't work. Like, I just can't, the money I'm making right now, I can't take that deduction to live even at the same lifestyle. So what does everyone expect you to do? Well, if you went to a traditional financial planner, not all of them, but if you went to, let's just say, if you go based on traditional financial planning thinking, or however everyone else is thinking, this is what they think actually financial freedom looks like. They think that because you're getting old and you're 65 and you've sort of paid a life of payments or whatever to your mortgages, your cars, and all that, that in retirement, technically, you know, you're not going to be getting, the great insurance you have right now from your employer. You'll go to Medicaid, Medicare or Medicaid, right? And you'll just deal with that insurance, the government insurance, right? Because you'll be on a fixed income, you won't be able to spend it, and you'll qualify for that. They think that you are going to own your own home. So the idea is that, you graduate, college, you get a good job, you go in and at 30 years old, you get married, have 2.5 children or whatever, and you're going to buy a house, and you're going to buy that house at 30, and the mortgage is going to be a 30-year mortgage. And so you are going to have that thing paid off by the time you are, 60, 65. Okay. And that you'll own your own car, because while through your working career, you may have switched out your cars like every 5 years, every 10 years, whatever. As you get old, as you get retirement, really, it's you and the wife. You probably don't even need two cars. You probably just go down to one because you're going to share it, because you're not driving to work anyway. And you guys can kind of just, go to the grocery store together, shop together, whatever. And because you're not driving around a lot, you're not going to put a lot of miles on it. You're not going to get a whole lot of gas, all the kinds of things. So really, you could probably just drive a used car with 30,000 miles on it. You could probably drive that until I don't know, until you die, right? Until you're going 25 years, because you're just not going to be really doing too much. And the idea there is that you're also not going to have any debt. You're not going to have any student loan debt. You're not going to have any credit card debt. If you did have children, the children are probably grown up. They've probably put them through college. They're probably married and kind of off living their own life. And so the idea is really that not that you'll necessarily have the same payments that you have right now. And in fact, that you'll kind of be living, and you'll just kind of need some pocket money. Pocket money is what I call it. And so that is the traditional sort of conceptual idea. And again, if you go to any sort of planner, and some of the big ones out there, and I'll shoot a name out there, Dave Ramsey, we're going to get into that kind of method. But if you listen to the guys that are like, live frugal, don't take out debt, and so forth, what most of them will tell you is that, oh, don't, if you want to retire early, if you want to hit financial freedom, if you want to supercharge everything, of course, live within your means. But they'll say to you, don't take out a 30-year mortgage, take out a 15-year mortgage. So that way, if you buy a house at 35, you're not going to be, 65 and still paying on it, right? You're going to have that done in 15 years. You're not going to have that debt. And then you're going to take that money and then you're going to put it more towards your retirement, the IRA, the traditional IRA, to make sure that $1 million, you hit that $1 million mark. And they'll say to you, don't buy a car with a loan, don't lease a car, only buy a car if you can afford it in cash, right? And don't ever use a credit card. Don't even ever even open a credit card. You don't need it, whatever. And so if you go to these guys, they basically will tell you exactly what I just said to you, that the lifestyle that they want you to live is, paid off mortgage or 15-year mortgage, which means instead of buying a larger house, you're probably buying a smaller house. If that, to pay off the 15 mortgage, you're putting more of your money towards that, which means there's less spending money for clothes and things like that, living super frugal. You're never going to really have a new car. You're always going to drive old used Toyota Corollas. You're never going to take out any debts. You're never going to go on a vacation and fund that with like a loan or a credit card or something and pay that off over the next 6 months. Never going to do that, which is actually not a good idea, but like you're never going to do that. You're just going to kind of live this frugal life. And for the most part, all of your money that you have, again, you're making 60 a year, you're putting, 1,000 of it back away so you can have that money in retirement. And you're just not going to spend or do anything ever. Well, the problem is that we don't live in that world. And while there are people that are super successful at that, okay, it just doesn't work. And we know it doesn't work because statistics show it doesn't work. People want to live in, a decent house. And generally that means for the most people, you're going to have to take out a 30-year mortgage. People want to switch their cars, maybe not every, 3 years or something like that, but maybe every, 5 years, 8 years or so. Like they kind of want to get the new model, the new technology or whatever. They put a lot of miles on it. They don't want to just drive around a beater. But the biggest part is not only that, because even if you said, okay, I'm not going to buy a bigger house, I'm not going to do all that. It's that people when they go into retirement, they don't necessarily want to live a life of a complete hermit, of not doing anything, not going anywhere, not whatever. It's just too difficult. So let's just talk about it real quick. So as we talked about, how long does it take you to pay off the house? How long does it take you to pay off the car? Realistically, especially for my individuals right now that are like maybe in your 35 or maybe in your 40 and you're already having a house, the idea of that you're going to have this house paid off and you're going to have no house payment, no car payment, even if you wanted to do that, okay, the idea that you're going to do that, it's not realistic. So there's another mode of thought that they say, well, maybe it isn't necessarily that you pay off your house, but maybe it is that you sell your house. Okay. And so what people will say is like, well, you buy a house for, let's say, $400,000. That's kind of the house price for today for just kind of a standard house in the Atlanta area. You buy a house for 400,000. And then over the next 20 or 15 years, you're kind of you're paying down that mortgage. Maybe you get to the age of 65, your kids have left and you decide instead of keeping that house, because you don't need such a big house, that you should sell your $400,000 house that might be worth now 650, or maybe it's even worth 800,000. You're going to sell that. You're going to pay off the remaining mortgage. And then that net proceeds you're going to use to then go downsize to something else. Okay. Without getting into the math of how that works, exactly like what house do you buy? How much do you have left over? The idea is like, hey, you're going to downsize any money that you have that you didn't use to pay for the other house. You can actually just throw into a stock funds, and again, you'll use that for retirement. But the idea is that you're not going to have this big, great, nice house that you might have had when you're 30s and your 40s and 50s, and that and somehow in retirement that you should be downgrading yourself again, selling the house, going into a small little condo, maybe down in Florida or something like that, and that you won't have that house payment because again, many of us, it's just completely, absolutely unrealistic that we're going to take out a mortgage when we're 30 or 35, and then we're going to pay on that for 30 years. We're going to retire when we're 65, and we're never going to have like upgraded that house. We're never going to get a promotion in our job and then decide we want to upgrade. Keeping in mind that if you're buying a house when you're in your 30s, it's probably a starter home. Once you kind of make a little bit of money, most people kind of want to upgrade. And so obviously that doesn't work. And so if I seem kind of, doom and gloom or whatever, Uh, I'm intentionally trying to make it to be a little bit doom and gloom because I really want this to sink in. As we went to the stats that we covered in I think it was the second lesson, most people are not even on pace for this type of retirement. But what the conventional people will tell you is that you should take if you were 30, 35 right now, that you should take your traditional lifestyle of whatever you're making right now. Again, let's just say $60,000 a year, and to ensure that you have some money in retirement at the age of 65, that you'll need to take probably 10 to 20% of your current check. That's probably not just barely making the means that your lifestyle that you have right now, barely. And you should take that and put that into the traditional IRA or 401k or something like that, some kind of retirement account, right? So live on less. You should buy a house for 30 years. You should pay that off. And then by the time you're 65, realistically, you're probably still going to have debt. You're probably still going to have, the housing payment and so forth. But at the time of your retirement, what you should be doing is instead of living in the house that you've been paying off and living in your current lifestyle right now, which you probably are like, I don't like the lifestyle I'm in right now. You should downgrade that particular lifestyle by selling your larger home, downsizing into a smaller home, that way ensuring you do not have a mortgage payment. At the point in time which you have a car, you should probably be thinking at the age of like 55, 60, you're going to be buying the last car that you'll use for the car you'll use for the rest of your life, or that you'll never be able to drive a new car through that period. You won't have a car payment. If you don't have a house payment and you don't have a car payment, and so obviously rent's out of the question, right? You don't have any of those things, then you could use the $1,000 you're saving every single month, or the $500 you're saving a month in your traditional IRA or 401k, right, to get the $1 million so that you can get 40 grand plus a little bit of Social Security. So you're going to get 5 or 6 grand. And in 30 years from now, that 5 or 6 grand is going to allow you just a little bit of pocket money to pay for your medical bills. Maybe if you want to go out here and there, if you ever want to take a vacation, but you're just going to have a little bit of money. And for the most part, you should just spend your time, I guess, sitting in the condo, playing Ouija, watching the news, reading books, walking on the beach. I don't know, but really not doing much of anything. A downgraded lifestyle from what you currently are, because heck, you're old, you're probably worn out because you've worked for 40 years. Again, that that is what most people believe is the best case scenario for your retirement, or what they'll project you for retirement is in sound financial planning. Even at that, very little, very little of our population is even coming close to even doing that. Most people are sitting paycheck to paycheck and they're like, I don't have money to put in retirement. And they are renting. Maybe they can't even afford a home right now. And the prospects of getting older, the prospect is really that I'm not going to be able to retire, that I'm always going to have some money coming in, and then I'm going to have maybe a little bit of retirement savings here and there. I'll get a little bit of Social Security, and I'm probably going to have to work as a bagger at Walmart, or whatever, or doing whatever you're doing until you're 70, 85, whatever it is until you plot. So that is not a good scenario. So we're going to go into this in the next video, and this is where it gets fun, guys. The next video is, what if I was to tell you that instead of the thinking of, I'm going to take out a bunch of money, I'm going to put in this nest egg, I'm going to have to work to try to pay off. What if I said to you, retirement is, always paying a mortgage, but actually never paying off the mortgage, intentionally never paying off the mortgage. And even if you get to a little position where some of the mortgage is paid off, you don't do that. You reverse that. Always paying on a car note, still changing out your cars every 3 to 5 years. Um, Basically carrying not a little debt, but potentially truckloads of debt, more debt than you'd probably feel comfortable doing right now. And again, never owning anything. So never fully outrunning owning your house, never owning your car, not really owning anything, having to pay out a lot of payments, but having truckloads and stacks of cash coming in. And so I use this I use this this image, which I love. This is from my childhood. We're going to go over a concept, and we'll mention it here, which is this idea. In one of the principles of the wealthy is that the poor or the working class are always working to own something. And it makes sense a lot of times. If I own it, I don't pay any debt on it, and that means I don't have a big payment that I need to make. And the less payment that I have to make, the less money I need to be coming in, so the quicker I can hit FI, which is true. The wealthy, however, are more concerned instead of owning something with control, with controlling it. I don't care personally. I don't care if I own anything. Okay. When you take out a loan in your car, do you own it? No. When you take out a mortgage on your house, do you own your house? You're like, oh, this is my house. That's not your house. That's the bank's house. The bank has a, don't pay your mortgage and see what happens. Even if you pay off your house, right? So you have zero mortgage balance, zero mortgage balance. Do you still own it? Kind of. I guess so. But if you don't pay the taxes, what happens? Yeah, they're going to come take your house. So you're always going to have the car payment or you're always going to have the housing payment. And so what if I was to say to you, you're always going to have the tax payment. So why not just take the mortgage payment as well? Why not solve for how do I make enough money or how do I have enough money to pay for the mortgage and the taxes versus trying to solve for how do I get rid of one, one method, paying everything off, having no debt, living super frugal, all of that is a scarcity mindset, right? The opposite of that, of going, I'm less concerned with what the payment is. I'm more concerned with what the amount, reducing the payment. I'm more concerned with creating the funds to pay for the payment. That's an abundance mindset. How do I go further? How do I make more? And what are the things that I can do to compensate over here? That difference of that is the difference between controlling something and owning something. The wealthy don't necessarily care about ownership. We care about control. And it's a mind shift. We're going to get deeper into that. Maybe just we're gonna let you sit and sort of think about that as we head into the next lesson. The next lesson is where we get into some really, really good examples. We're going to discuss this further, and we're going to specifically talk about the two ways that you can retire. We kind of talked a little bit of one today, but we're going to talk about the second one, but we're going to give examples, and we're going to try to untrain your mind about everything you've probably thought um, up until this point, and to hopefully set the stage for getting you to see and understand a completely different way of looking at money. And that's the secret. Until next time.